Corinne Mitchell stood at the edge of her pool, hands on her hips, surveying her kingdom with the satisfied smile of someone who had built everything perfectly. The water sparkled like liquid diamonds under the California sun, the stone deck immaculate, the infinity edge creating the illusion that the pool extended endlessly toward the mountains beyond. She'd paid $3.2 million for this house 3 years ago, and every penny showed. It was Tuesday, 10 a.m., and Corinne had just finished her morning yoga session, the one she posted on Instagram every Tuesday and Thursday. Her 47,000 followers had already liked the photo. Corinne in downward dog, the pool gleaming behind her, the caption reading, "Grateful for this vessel and this view. Blessed life, fitness joy." The comments rolled in. Fire emojis, heart emojis, messages from women saying she was their inspiration. If only they knew. Corinne wrapped her white terry cloth robe around her body. Hers cost more than most people's monthly rent, and padded into the house through the sliding glass doors. The kitchen was a cathedral of marble and stainless steel, a place where Corinne rarely actually cooked. There was a meal prep service for that, a nutritionist on speed dial, and a personal chef who came 3 times a week. Her phone buzzed, text from her husband, Derek. "Big meeting running late. Won't be home until 8, don't wait dinner." Corinne didn't respond. She never did anymore. Derek was a venture capitalist, handsome in that generic way that came from expensive gyms and dermatologists, and completely absent from their marriage in every way that mattered. They'd been together for 11 years. They'd stopped talking 4 years ago. She poured a green smoothie, celery, spinach, protein powder, and a shot of vodka because it was past 10 a.m., and moved to her home office. The walls were a calming sage green, the desk faced a window with a view of the pool. This was Corinne's throne room where she ran her business. Corinne Mitchell was an influencer, not a desperate TikTok teenager. She was a brand. The Corinne Mitchell brand, wellness coaching, lifestyle content, motivational speaking to corporations. Last year, she'd made $847,000 from sponsored posts alone. She had a book deal in the works. Her podcast, Elevate Your Corinne, had 300,000 subscribers. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew her. She opened her laptop and pulled up the comments section of her latest Instagram post. A photo of her at a charity gala, draped in designer clothes, raising a glass of champagne for mental health awareness. Most comments were positive, inspirational, powerful, but there were others, the ones she always scrolled to eventually, even though they made her sick. Fake as hell. I know this woman, she's nothing like this IRL. Money can't buy you class. Corinne scrolled past. Haters. There were always haters, people jealous of success. People who didn't understand that the curated version of yourself online was just the best version, the version you aspired to be. That wasn't lying, that was branding. She was deep in editing a reel. Slow-motion shot of her in the pool, followed by her making a smoothie, followed by meditation pose, when her phone rang. Unknown number. Corinne almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers were usually telemarketers or people trying to sell her something, but something made her pick up. Hello. Silence on the other end, then breathing, heavy, deliberate breathing. Hello, Corinne repeated, her irritation rising. Who is this? You know who this is, a woman's voice, young, quavering, angry. I'm sorry, I don't know you. Please stop calling this number or I'll. It's Lily. Corinne's blood stopped moving through her body. There is no Lily that she started, but the line had already gone dead. She stared at the phone in her hand. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She told herself to breathe, to think, to remember that she didn't know anyone named Lily, that it was a wrong number, that it meant nothing. But her hands were shaking as she set the phone down. She looked out the window at the pool. The water was so blue, so perfect, like nothing in the world had ever touched it. Corinne tried not to think about the call. She spent the rest of the day creating content. Yoga in the afternoon, different pose, same location. A smoothie bowl lunch, the second one, but she edited out the vodka bottle in the background. A sunset meditation by the pool, filmed in magic hour, posted with a caption about gratitude and finding your inner light even in dark times. Her followers loved it, 6,000 likes in the first hour. At 7:45 p.m., she prepared Derek's study for his arrival home. She'd learned years ago that men like Derek needed to feel welcomed, even when they didn't care about you. She lit the expensive candle from that artisanal place in Beverly Hills. She made sure the ice was ready for his scotch. She changed into a dress he liked, black, flattering, expensive. She knew the dance by heart. Derek arrived at 8:23 p.m., loosening his tie, his eyes already on his phone. "Hey," Karen said, greeting him with a kiss he didn't quite return. "Hey, you eat. I waited for you." He glanced up as if just noticing her for the first time. "I'm going to order something, want anything. I made reservations at Nabu." "Karen, I'm exhausted. I just want something simple." He was already moving past her toward the kitchen, already pulling up his phone's food delivery app. She stood there in her expensive dress and felt something crack inside her chest. Something small but audible, like ice breaking on a lake. "Sure," she said quietly, "whatever you want." She ate nothing, drank 2 glasses of wine, and was in bed by 10:30 p.m. telling Derek she had a migraine. It was a good excuse. She had a lot of migraines. At 2:47 a.m., Karen woke from a dream she couldn't remember, her heart racing. The bedroom was dark except for the soft glow of the pool lights through the window. She'd had those lights installed specifically for nighttime ambience. They cast the water in a soft turquoise hue. Derek was asleep beside her, his breathing deep and even unbothered. Karen slipped out of bed and padded downstairs. The house was quiet in that particular way expensive homes are quiet, insulated, protected, removed from the world. She could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of the ice maker in the fridge. She made her way to the glass doors and looked out at the pool. The water was undisturbed, perfect, serene. She opened the door and stepped out onto the deck, barefoot, wearing only an oversized t-shirt. The night air was cool against her skin. She walked to the edge of the pool and looked down at her reflection in the dark water. A face looked back that she barely recognized. Still beautiful, she'd made sure of that through strategic procedures and expensive skincare, but tired, hollow, like someone wearing a Karen Mitchell mask rather than being Karen Mitchell. She was about to turn back to the house when she noticed something. At the far end of the pool, near the infinity edge, something was different. She squinted. A mark on the deck, maybe, or just a shadow. She walked around the pool toward it, her footsteps echoing softly on the stone. The night was darker on this side, away from the lights. She tried to see what she'd noticed, but there was nothing. Just the smooth, flawless surface of the deck she paid someone to clean weekly. A sound behind her made her spin around. A figure stood at the far side of the yard, near the fence that bordered the neighbor's property. A person-shaped shadow against the darker darkness of the night. "Who's there?" Karen's voice was suddenly high, frightened. "Derek." The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there watching. "I'm calling the police," Karen screamed. The figure turned and ran, disappearing into the neighbor's yard. Karen ran inside, her heart hammering, and locked the door. She called out for Derek, already moving toward the stairs. He appeared at the bottom of the staircase in boxer shorts, looking annoyed. "What is it? What's all the screaming?" "There's someone outside. Someone was in our yard." Derek's expression shifted to concern. He moved to the glass doors and peered out. "Where?" "By the fence. They ran that way," Karen pointed. Derek grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, the kind of thing Derek kept but had never needed, and stepped outside. He panned the beam across the yard, across the pool, across the dark garden. "Nothing, no one. Probably just a coyote," he said when he came back in. "This area has them. They come down from the hills." "That was not a coyote." "Did you see a face, a person?" Karen hesitated. Had she? Or had she just seen a shape and projected the idea of a person onto it? "I saw something," she said finally. "Someone." Derek put his arm around her in a way that felt dutiful rather than comforting. "You're stressed. You've been stressed. Maybe take something to help you sleep. We can call the security company tomorrow if you want, but I'm telling you, it was probably nothing." He went back to bed. Karen stayed downstairs on the couch, lights on, staring out at the pool until sunrise. By Wednesday morning, she'd almost convinced herself it was nothing. The mind plays tricks in the dark. She had been watching too many true crime documentaries. The stress of managing her brand, of maintaining the perfect image, of keeping up with the demanding algorithms of social media, it was getting to her. She posted about it anyway, just not like that. When your nervous system is overactive, even shadows can feel threatening. This is why I prioritize my spiritual practice and mental health. A calm mind sees threats accurately, not imagined ones. Remember to breathe into the discomfort. 3,000 likes in 15 minutes. Comments flooded in from people relating, sharing their own anxieties, thanking her for the wisdom. None of them knew she'd been screaming in her backyard at 2:47 a.m. Derek left for work early. Karen showered, did her makeup, and changed into workout clothes. She had a 9 a.m. virtual coaching call with a corporate client who was paying her $5,000 to tell them about confidence and authenticity. She looked directly into the camera, smiled radiantly, and told them that living authentically meant being honest with yourself first, that you couldn't build a real life on a foundation of illusion. The client loved it. They were already talking about booking her for their annual conference. At 11 a.m., as Karen was editing the video of the session, her phone rang again. Unknown number. This time, she hesitated before answering. Yes. It's Lily, the same voice, younger than Karen initially thought, trembling with rage or fear or both. We need to talk. I don't know who you are, Karen said, but her hand was tightening on the phone. Yes, you do. You knew my mother, Stephanie Chen. Karen's mouth went dry. I don't. Don't lie to me. I know you're lying. Lily's voice cracked. I know everything, and I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too. The line went dead. Karen sat in her pristine kitchen in her expensive home, looking out at her perfect pool, and felt the ground beneath her crack and shift. It was a small crack, just a hairline fracture in the foundation. But it was there, and she knew it would grow. Derek was at a venture capital event in downtown LA, one she hadn't been invited to. She told herself she didn't care, but she did. She cared that he didn't want her there. She cared that their marriage had become the kind of thing where they existed in the same house like ghosts. She had a bottle of Sansero on the marble counter, and she poured a glass, then another. By the time the sun was setting, she was on glass number 4, and her inhibitions were soft and blurry. She pulled out her phone and did something she'd been avoiding for 6 months. She Googled Stephanie Chen. The results came back instantly, as if the internet had been waiting for her to ask. News article from the Los Angeles Times, dated 3 years and 7 months ago. Local woman's death ruled accidental, despite family's concerns. Below that, another article. SDPHANICHEN's family seeks answers after inconclusive investigation. Karen's hands shook as she clicked the first link. Stephanie Chen, 51, had been found dead in her home in Pasadena. The official cause of death was a fall down the stairs, exacerbated by alcohol consumption and the medical condition that had plagued her final years, early-onset dementia. The article mentioned that Stephanie had been a high school history teacher for 23 years, that she'd been beloved by her students, that she'd left behind 2 adult children, a son in Seattle and a daughter, Lily, who still lived in the Los Angeles area. There was more, but Karen skipped ahead, searching for something specific. She found it in the second article. A quote from Lily Chen, 19 at the time. My mother didn't fall, my mother was pushed, and I know who did it. I have evidence, but no one at the police department will listen. The woman involved is connected, she's rich, she has lawyers. My mother was nobody as far as they're concerned. Karen's eyes scanned the rest of the article, searching for her name, but it wasn't there. Stephanie's alleged pusher had remained unnamed in the public record, protected either by the lawyer's cease and desist letters or by the police department's strategic incompetence. But Karen knew, and now Lily Chen knew that Karen knew. Karen poured another glass of wine and did something she'd trained herself not to do for almost 7 years. It was a Tuesday morning, 7 years ago, before Derek, before the house, before the Instagram account and the podcast and the brand. Karen had been a different person then, or maybe she was the same person just before she learned to hide. She was working as a wellness coach in a shared studio in Culver City, barely scraping by. She was freshly divorced from her first husband, living in a 1-bedroom apartment, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake leaving him. Stephanie Chen had come to her for coaching. Stephanie was soft-spoken and kind, a woman whose life had been derailed by her husband's infidelity and her subsequent depression. She wanted help rebuilding herself. She wanted to become stronger, less vulnerable, more emotionally defended. Karen knew how to do that. At first, it was just coaching. But as the months progressed, Karen began to notice that Stephanie had money. The inheritance from her mother, she explained. Enough that she was considering taking early retirement from teaching. Stephanie trusted Karen with everything. Her fears, her secrets, her shame about how her marriage had fallen apart. Stephanie cried in Karen's arms. And Karen, who had been drinking then too, though less obviously, had seen an opportunity. It had started with small things. Karen suggested that Stephanie invest in a business venture, a wellness retreat that Karen was developing. Stephanie wrote a check for $45,000. Then it was a property investment. Stephanie had the down payment. Karen needed an investor. They could be partners. Stephanie wrote another check. Over the course of 2 years, Stephanie gave Karen $187,000. Most of it Karen spent on herself. The business venture never happened. The property investment was a sham. And Stephanie, who had begun to show signs of cognitive decline, early onset dementia, they would later learn, began to realize something was wrong. She wanted the money back. She had documents showing the investments. She had receipts. She had gone to a lawyer. Karen had panicked. It was a Tuesday morning, Stephanie's day off from teaching. Karen had driven to Pasadena and used the key that Stephanie had given her years ago when they were truly friends. They argued in the upstairs hallway of Stephanie's small house. Stephanie was crying, confused, angry. Karen was defending herself, denying the fraud, saying that the business had just failed, that they'd both lost money, that this was a misunderstanding. Stephanie had turned toward the stairs. What happened next, Karen had never quite let herself fully remember. It existed in her mind like a dream, soft-edged and half-real. Had she pushed? Or had Stephanie simply stumbled? Had Karen's hand touched her back as a gesture of comfort or as something else? The sound of Stephanie's body hitting the stairs. The dull crack of her head against the hardwood. Stephanie lay at the bottom of the staircase, unconscious, with blood pooling under her head. Karen had stepped over her and left the house. She'd told herself it was an accident, that Stephanie had just fallen, that whatever happened next wasn't her responsibility. Stephanie died 3 days later in the hospital, without ever regaining consciousness. The investigation was cursory. A woman in her 50s with early dementia and alcohol issues had fallen down the stairs. It happened. The case was closed. Karen had changed her name from Carter to Mitchell, her mother's maiden name. She'd moved to Los Angeles proper, to the hills. She'd started over with a new look, a new brand, a new life that bore no resemblance to the struggling wellness coach who'd stolen $187,000 from a dying woman. She'd made herself into Karen Mitchell, and for 7 years, she'd managed not to think too hard about the woman she'd been before. Karen woke up on the kitchen tile at 3 a.m., face pressed against the cold marble, her wine glass overturned beside her. She had no memory of lying down. Her head pounded with the specific pain of cheap alcohol and dissociation. She pulled herself up slowly and made her way to the guest bathroom, where she vomited until there was nothing left. She rinsed her mouth with expensive mouthwash and stared at herself in the mirror. The face that stared back looked like it was disintegrating. The makeup was smeared. The foundation was splotchy. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman whose carefully constructed reality was coming apart. She took 2 Ambien, climbed into bed next to her sleeping husband, and lay in the dark, waiting for oblivion. The next morning, she woke to Derek already gone, and her phone exploding with notifications. At first, she couldn't understand what she was seeing. Her Instagram was being flooded with comments on every post, going back months. Hundreds of them, all the same phrase, slightly varied. The hashtag "Who is Stephanie Chen" was trending locally in the Los Angeles area. Someone had made a TikTok, a viral TikTok, that was a simple text-on-black video. This woman coaches people on living authentically. This woman teaches people about being their best self. This woman has 47,000 followers who think she's a guru. This woman is Karen Mitchell. 7 years ago, she was involved in the death of a woman named Stephanie Chen. The death was ruled accidental. But was it? It had 1.2 million views. The comments were a mix of disbelief, rage, and people claiming to know more. People dredging up the old news articles. People doing research. People who had known Stephanie, who were writing tributes to her, who were expressing their rage that Karen Mitchell was still out there, still profiting, still pretending to be someone who had integrity. Corinne's phone was ringing, calls from her agent, calls from sponsors, calls from brands that had been planning to work with her. All cancellations, all apologies that came too late to matter. Then a call from a number she recognized as the West Los Angeles Police Department. They wanted her to come in for an interview. Nothing formal, they assured her, just to discuss the allegations that were circulating online regarding her connection to Stephanie Chen's death. Corinne hung up and threw the phone across the room. The Pandora's box was open, and inside wasn't just the truth about Stephanie Chen. There were other things, other people, other decisions she'd made that had seemed small at the time but now, in the light of exposure, looked monumentally damaging. Her first marriage, she'd left her husband because she'd been having an affair with a client who'd promised to leave his own wife. He never did, and Corinne ended up alone and bitter, deciding that the problem was the men, not her choices. A business partner, early on, who'd been pushed out of their venture and accused Corinne of stealing his ideas. Corinne had simply changed the details of the idea and launched it under her name instead. A friendship that had ended badly when Corinne had told her friend's secret to someone else, and the secret had become public. She'd never apologized. It was all too much, too quickly. By noon, she had 17 missed calls from Derek. She'd apparently gotten so drunk that she'd sent him a rambling text that simply said, "I'm not who you think I am." He'd taken it as a personal attack. Now he was concerned or angry or both. Corinne took a shower and dressed carefully, as if the armor of the right outfit might protect her. She was choosing between two celine blouses when she heard something that made her freeze. A sound from outside. The pool equipment. No, wait, not the equipment, something else. She looked out the bedroom window toward the pool area. There was a truck in the driveway, a truck with the words "Luxury Pool Maintenance" on the side. She hadn't called for maintenance. Derek must have called them, or... No, Derek didn't know she was in crisis. He couldn't have arranged this. Corinne went downstairs, her heart rate accelerating. Through the glass doors, she could see a man in the pool. Not a technician, not someone from the maintenance company. A young man, probably in his early 20s. Lean and muscular, moving through the water with the ease of someone who'd spent his whole life in pools. He was doing something with the filtration system, checking something, taking notes. As Corinne watched, he pulled himself out of the pool and looked directly at the glass doors. Directly at her, Corinne's instinct was to call the police, but she didn't move. Something kept her frozen, watching through the glass. The boy, because he was definitely a boy, couldn't have been more than 23, wrapped a towel around his waist and walked toward the house. His movements were casual, unconcerned, like this was completely normal. He raised his hand and knocked on the glass door. "Mrs. Mitchell," he called, "I need to talk to you." Corinne's mouth was dry. She opened the door slowly, maintaining what she hoped was a posture of confidence, of authority. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" Gate was open. He smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who'd seen something he wasn't supposed to see. "I'm Marcus Chen, Lily's brother. I came from Seattle when she called me and told me what was happening." Corinne's stomach dropped. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice wasn't convincing. "You do, but let me explain anyway." Marcus stepped out of the pool, water streaming off his body. He didn't seem bothered by his near-nakedness, or perhaps he intended it as a power play, a reminder that he had youth and physicality on his side, that he could access her space however he wanted. "My mother died 7 years ago. The official story was that she fell down the stairs, but my sister never believed it. She was 15 when it happened, and she knew something was wrong." "I'm sorry about your mother," Corinne said, the words automatic, meaningless. "No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught." Marcus walked past her into the kitchen. He moved through her space with the confidence of someone who'd already decided he belonged there. "My sister has been collecting evidence for 7 years. Bank records showing money transfers to you, emails between you and my mom, text messages, court documents from legal proceedings that never went public because the family didn't have the money or the power to push it further. But she has all of it." "That doesn't prove anything." "Doesn't it?" Marcus turned to face her, his eyes cold with the fury of a young man who'd watched his family destroyed by the indifference of the justice system. "It proves you defrauded her. It proves she was planning legal action. It proves you had motive. And now, with Lily's TikTok blowing up. That was her, she made that video. She started it, but everyone else is piling on now. The internet's doing what the LAPD couldn't be bothered to do, they're investigating. He moved toward the pool window, looking out at the water. Beautiful pool, by the way, very Instagram-worthy. I was checking it earlier while you were asleep. Thought maybe I'd add something to it, make it more interesting. Corinne's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Nothing yet, but I'm thinking about it. He turned back to her, and now there was something darker in his expression, something dangerous. My sister lost her mother, I lost my mother, our father couldn't handle the grief. He had a stroke 2 years after her death, partially paralyzed. Lily's been taking care of him for the last 5 years while working a full-time job and going to school part-time. You took my mother and you took years from my sister's life, and you walked away clean. I didn't. Please don't insult me by saying you didn't do it. You did. We know you did. The only question now is what we're going to do about it. There was a sound from the upstairs hallway, Derek's footsteps. Marcus heard it too. He smiled that cold smile again. Mr. Mitchell's home? Great. Maybe I should introduce myself, tell him about your past, tell him who you really are. Don't, the word came out of Corinne with surprising force. Please, I'll pay you whatever you want, whatever amount. This isn't about money, Marcus said. This is about justice, and justice is going to look different than you think. Derek appeared at the top of the stairs, already in a t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair messed from running his hands through it in stress. Corinne, who's here? I saw a truck outside. He stopped, seeing Marcus dripping wet in his kitchen. Who the hell is this? Marcus Chen, the boy said, extending his wet hand. I'm here about my mother, Stephanie Chen. Derek looked at Corinne, then back at Marcus, confusion flickering across his face. I don't understand, Derek said carefully. Do we know a Stephanie Chen? Your wife does, Marcus said. Intimately, until my mother became inconvenient. Derek's eyes landed on Corinne, and she saw the moment his brain caught up to what was happening. He'd already seen the tick-tock. She realized now that he had, the way he'd been looking at her this morning was different. Worse. You need to leave, Derek said to Marcus, his voice dangerous in a way that surprised Corinne. Derek was many things, but he wasn't confrontational. Get out of my house. Gladly. Marcus headed toward the door, water dripping on the Italian tile. But this isn't over. Lily's already given everything to the police, already made a statement. They're reopening the investigation. Your wife is about to become very famous, Mrs. Mitchell, just not the way she expected. He left, and Derek didn't move until they heard the truck start and drive away. Then he turned to look at Corinne, and his expression was something she'd never seen before. It was disgust. Corinne couldn't. The lie wouldn't come. She was too tired, too exposed, too broken to maintain another fiction. It was an accident, she said finally. Or mostly an accident. I wasn't trying to. Derek held up his hand. I don't want to hear it. I don't want the explanation. I want to know, is it true? Did you kill this woman? The word kill hung in the air between them like something physical. I didn't mean to, Corinne whispered. Derek walked to the living room window and looked out at the pool. He stood there for a long time without speaking. I need you to understand something, he said finally, his voice quiet and cold. I don't care about your brand, I don't care about your followers, I don't care about any of it. What I care about is that I married a woman who I thought was good, and now I'm finding out that woman might be a murderer. He turned to face her. I'm going to the Four Seasons, I'm going to call a lawyer, and when the police come, and they will come, you're going to tell them everything. Do you understand me? Corinne nodded, unable to speak. No, Derek continued. Look at me, do you understand? She met his eyes, yes. And Corinne, the next time you post something on Instagram about living authentically or finding your inner light, I want you to remember that I know exactly what you are. I hope it makes you feel very heavy inside. He left without another word, leaving Corinne alone in her perfect house, surrounded by her perfect things, with the perfect pool glittering in the afternoon sun outside the windows. She sat down on her $1,000,000 sofa and waited for the police to arrive. They came at 4:47 p.m., 2 detectives and a uniformed officer. They had a warrant. They had evidence. They had Lily Chen's testimony and her mother's medical records and a letter Stephanie had written to her lawyer, never sent, that detailed everything. Corinne Mitchell was arrested on suspicion of second-degree murder, fraud, and a host of other charges that the detective rattled off like a shopping list. As they put her in the back of the police car, neighbors came out of their houses to watch. She could see phones being raised, videos being recorded. The Corinne Mitchell brand, captured in real time, falling apart. In an interview room at the West LA station, Corinne broke down and told them everything. How she'd targeted Stephanie specifically, having seen her at a community event and noted the wealth. How she'd cultivated the friendship carefully, strategically. How she'd committed the fraud with careful precision, letting Stephanie believe they were in legitimate business ventures together. How, when Stephanie had threatened to expose her and take her to court, Corinne had panicked. She even told them about the moment in the hallway, how she'd felt Stephanie's frail back against her hand, how she hadn't thought Stephanie was fragile enough to die from a fall like that, how she'd convinced herself it was an accident, something that would have happened anyway, something beyond her control. The detective across from her, a woman named Sarah Hernandez, listened without expression. "Did you call for help?" Hernandez asked. Corinne didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The facts were damning, and speaking about them didn't change them. "We're going to talk to forensic specialists," Hernandez said. "It's been 7 years, but sometimes evidence persists. Regardless of what they find, you've admitted to fleeing the scene of an accident. That alone is going to cost you." Corinne was booked, processed, and placed in a holding cell by 6:15 p.m. By 6:47 p.m., the story had exploded across the internet. By 7:30 p.m., she had no remaining brand deals, no remaining sponsorships, and no remaining followers who didn't think she was a monster. The woman who'd built herself into a symbol of authenticity and wellness had become a symbol of something else. The darkness that money can hide, the lies that beauty can enable, the consequences that always arrive, even when you think you've escaped them. The Orange County Jail was nothing like what Corinne had seen on television. There were no dramatic confrontations, no intimidating inmates with stories to tell. Instead, there was just a grinding, bureaucratic indifference that was somehow worse. Orange jumpsuits, fluorescent lights, the sound of keys and locks and doors that opened remotely, operated by people who didn't care what happened on the other side. Her cell was a concrete box 8 feet by 10 feet, shared with a woman named Deshonda who worked as a night manager at a hotel and had been arrested for embezzlement. Deshonda took one look at Corinne when she arrived and said, "Oh, hell, you're that Instagram lady, the one who killed that teacher." "I didn't kill her," Corinne said automatically. "That's not what your confession says," Deshonda replied, going back to a battered paperback she was reading. Corinne laid on the bottom bunk and didn't sleep. Bail was set at $250,000. Derek, speaking through his lawyer, made it clear he would not be posting it. Her parents in Wisconsin could not afford it. No friends came forward. When the lawyers contacted them, suddenly no one remembered Corinne very well. The public defender assigned to her case, a burnt-out woman named Michelle Torres, told her to expect jail time. "Could be 3 to 5, Torres said. "Could be more. Depends on how the DA wants to prosecute. Could charge you with second-degree murder and they push for life. Could charge you with manslaughter and you're looking at 15 years plus fraud charges." "What are my options?" Corinne asked. "Plead guilty to manslaughter, accept 15 years, and hope for early parole. Or go to trial and hope the jury believes the accident narrative." Corinne didn't want to do either. What she wanted was to go back in time to 2017 and not target Stephanie Chen. To take whatever job she could get, to stay poor and anonymous and irrelevant. To be someone other than the person she'd become. But time didn't work that way. She spent the first week crying. She spent the second week not eating. By the third week, Deshonda had taken pity on her enough to trade her lunch for Corinne's, understanding that Corinne was in a kind of shock that needed to run its course. "You gotta get your head right," Deshonda told her. "You doing this to yourself, and yeah, what you did was messed up, but you still gotta survive. You still gotta eat. You still gotta sleep. You still gotta exist, and when you get out, you gotta build something better. That's how you make it right." Corinne wasn't sure it was possible to make it right, but she started eating again anyway. The trial date was set for March, 5 months away. During those months, Corinne's story became a cultural touchstone for something larger than herself. She represented wealth inequality, the ease with which attractive women could hide their cruelty behind a smile, the way internet fame could obscure reality. Her Instagram posts became memes, the photos of her looking serene by the pool now captioned with accusations, jokes, dark humor. Lily Chen became a minor celebrity herself. She was interviewed on podcasts, on local news programs. She talked about her mother with the exhaustion of someone who'd carried grief for so long that it had become a part of her skeletal structure. The internet loved her. Donations were set up for her father's medical care. A production company optioned the rights to make a documentary about the case. Through her lawyers, Karen tried to reach out to Lily, not to apologize, what was the point of that, but to acknowledge somehow what she'd done. The message came back through tours. Lily Chen had no interest in communicating with her mother's killer. Fair enough. Derek filed for divorce in February. He kept the house, which meant he got the pool. Karen didn't fight him on it. She didn't fight him on anything. A quiet, efficient dissolution of a marriage that had been slowly dying anyway. In the visitation area of the jail, Derek came to sign the divorce papers. They sat across from each other with a small table between them, and Karen barely recognized the man she'd been married to for 11 years. He looked older, diminished, like something in him had curdled. "I didn't know," he said finally, the first real thing he'd said to her since her arrest. "I want you to know that I didn't suspect. I wouldn't have stayed if I had." Karen nodded. She believed him. Derek was many things, but he wasn't the kind of man who could live with the knowledge of what she'd done. "I'm sorry," Karen said, "for all of it, for lying to you, for being someone you thought you could trust and having that be a lie." Derek looked past her rather than at her, and Karen understood that she'd lost more than her freedom. She'd lost the ability to be seen as good by anyone who'd ever known her. The trial lasted 8 days. The prosecution's case was meticulous. They presented bank records, emails, text messages. They called friends of Stephanie's who testified about how Stephanie had been worried about her investments, how she'd mentioned Karen multiple times, how she'd been planning legal action. They called Stephanie's doctor, who testified that while she'd had early-onset dementia, she wasn't so incapacitated that she couldn't think clearly about financial matters. Most damning of all, they called Lily. Lily was calm and articulate as she described finding her mother on the staircase, as she described how the police had been unwilling to investigate further once they saw that Stephanie had a small amount of alcohol in her system, as she described the frustration of knowing, without proof, that her mother's death was not accidental. She looked directly at Karen once during her testimony. It was the most terrifying moment of the trial. Karen's defense team, which consisted of Michelle Torres and a partner named Jackson Price who specialized in violent crimes, tried to argue that Stephanie's death was indeed accidental. That their client had been present, yes, but that a woman with dementia on a staircase could fall without anyone pushing her. That there was no physical evidence of murder. That Karen's confession of, "I didn't mean to," and "it was mostly an accident," could be interpreted as admissions of witnessing an accident, not perpetrating one. It was a thin argument, and the jury didn't buy it. She was convicted of voluntary manslaughter in the 2nd degree. 30 years, with the possibility of parole after 15. When the verdict was read, Karen felt something break inside her that was deeper than anything that had broken before. It was the break of irrevocable consequences, of a life sentence that wasn't actually a life sentence but might as well be. 30 years would take her from 41 to 71. She would emerge from prison as an old woman if she emerged at all. Lily wept when the verdict was announced, but not from sadness, from relief. Stephanie Chen's name was mentioned 16 times during the trial, and each time it was mentioned, Lily flinched, as if hearing her mother's name was a small pain she'd have to get used to carrying. Karen was transported to the California Department of Corrections facility in Chowchilla on a Tuesday morning in May. She wore the orange uniform and the chains, and tried to understand how she'd gotten here, how the journey from California mansion to maximum security prison had taken less than a year. But she knew exactly how. She'd chosen this. Each decision, from targeting Stephanie to stealing her money to leaving her dying on a staircase, had been a choice. And now those choices had consequences that would extend for decades. In her new cell, in her new life, Karen thought about the pool. Her perfect, pristine, neon blue pool. She thought about how she'd posted so many photos of it, so many times, using it as a symbol of her success, her beauty, her somehow managed to get everything right life. She wondered if Derek ever swam in it. She wondered if he ever thought about her when he looked at it. She wondered if Lily Chen ever drove by the house just to see it. These thoughts circled in her head like sharks, and Karen realized she would be circling them for a very long time. It wasn't by choice, exactly. Nothing in prison was by choice, but it was better than the kitchen or the laundry or the other work assignments. In the library, among the outdated books and the worn copies of paperback romance novels, Karen found something approaching peace. The library was run by Ms. Patricia Okonkwo, a 68-year-old former English teacher who'd ended up in Chowchilla for reasons she never discussed. Patricia was intelligent, kind in a way that didn't require being soft, and completely unimpressed by Karen's fall from grace. "You were someone once," Patricia told her during Karen's first week. "Now you're someone else. The person you were is dead. The question is, what are you going to become?" It was a version of the thing Deshonda had said, but with more weight behind it. Karen didn't answer. She just organized books and tried to be invisible. Months passed. She worked. She attended her required counseling sessions. She didn't get into fights. She wasn't the kind of prisoner anyone paid attention to. She was too compliant, too quiet, too wrapped in her own guilt to be interesting. Then, on a Tuesday morning in January, a delivery came to the library. It was a box of donated books from the outside world. Karen was sorting through them when she found something that made her breath catch. A photograph, used as a bookmark in a book on meditation and mindfulness. It was Stephanie Chen, but not the Stephanie that Karen had killed. Not the anxious, confused woman dealing with early-onset dementia. This was a younger Stephanie, maybe 40, smiling at the camera with her arms around two children, Marcus and Lily, Karen assumed, both younger, both free from the weight they now carried. Behind them was a pool, a neon green pool. Karen's hands shook as she studied the image. It was at a community recreation center, some kind of public pool where the water had been treated with bright chemicals. Stephanie and her children looked happy, genuinely happy in the way that people do when they're not performing for anyone but themselves. Karen flipped the bookmark over. On the back, in careful handwriting, "Stephanie, thank you for everything you taught us. We're bringing you with us. L." Karen realized what was happening. The book was a donation from Lily. The photograph was Lily's way of ensuring that Stephanie's memory would be seen by someone, by Karen. Patricia appeared at her shoulder, startling her. "You want to tell me what's wrong?" Karen showed her the photograph without speaking. Patricia took it, studied Karen's face, and seemed to understand immediately what was happening. "That's her," Patricia said. It wasn't a question. Karen nodded. "And her daughter sent this here intentionally." "Yes." Patricia handed the photograph back. "What do you want to do?" Karen didn't have an answer. She wanted to burn the photograph. She wanted to weep. She wanted to somehow communicate with Lily that she understood what Lily was doing, which was ensuring that her mother was real, that her mother's existence mattered, that the woman Karen had killed was not just a footnote in Karen's tragedy, but a human being who had been loved. "I'll catalog it," Karen said finally. "I'll keep it with the book, and if no one checks it out before my assignment ends, I'll make sure it goes to someone who will appreciate what's inside." Patricia nodded approvingly. "That's a start." Karen did more than catalog it. She read the meditation book, cover to cover, twice. She learned the author's philosophy, which was that everyone contained within them both light and darkness, and the work of spiritual maturity was learning to acknowledge the darkness without being consumed by it. It resonated, not because it absolved her of anything, but because it allowed her to exist in her own life without requiring that she hate herself entirely. There was space between "I did a terrible thing" and "I am entirely terrible." It was a narrow space, but it was real. 3 years into her sentence, Karen was assaulted. It happened in the yard on a Tuesday afternoon. Another inmate, someone Karen barely knew, came at her with a shank made from a broken piece of metal and a handle of cloth. Karen managed to raise her arm to block the first strike, which meant the blade went into her upper arm instead of her chest or neck. She bled profusely. She was taken to the prison hospital. She required 17 stitches. As she lay in the medical ward, injured and shocked, Michelle Torres, still her attorney, though they had little contact, called her with news. "There's been a development in your case," Torres said. "It concerns me, so I wanted to call you directly." Karen's immediate thought was that the conviction was being overturned. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine that somehow this could be undone, that the past 5 years could be reframed as a nightmare from which she was waking. But Tor's next words took that away. The security footage from the day of Stephanie's death has been located. It was in the Chen's personal files, held by their attorney. Lily just released it to the police and to the DA's office. Corinne's heart rate spiked. There was a security camera in Stephanie's house. She remembered it now, a small camera that Stephanie had mentioned installing to monitor her front door for package thieves. Corinne had forgotten about it entirely. She'd never seen the footage. "What does it show?" she asked. There was a long silence. "It shows what you told the police," Torres said finally, "when you said the fall was accidental." The world tilted. "What?" "The footage shows you and Stephanie arguing at the top of the stairs. It shows Stephanie turning away from you suddenly. It shows her losing her footing. And it shows your hand reaching out to try to catch her. You didn't push her, Corinne. You reached for her, and you missed." Corinne couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. "I've already contacted the DA. They're reviewing the evidence. This is significant. You may have grounds for appeal, a new trial at minimum." "Why?" Corinne whispered. "Why would Lily release this?" "I don't know," Torres said, "but the DA wants to talk to you. I'll be there. Don't say anything until I arrive." DA came to the prison hospital to speak with Corinne in person. His name was James Hernandez, Detective Sarah Hernandez's brother, though neither Corinne nor he mentioned this connection. "The security footage is clear," he said without preamble. "You reached for her when she fell. Multiple angles confirm this. You didn't push her. You attempted to save her." "Why are you telling me this?" Corinne asked. "This should help me. Why are you coming here to tell me this?" "Because I wanted to see your face," Hernandez said. "I wanted to know if you already knew what the footage showed." "I didn't. I forgot about the camera entirely." Hernandez studied her. "Why did you confess to pushing her then? If it was an accident, if you reached for her, why did you say those things?" Corinne thought about this. She thought about 2017, when she'd been so young feeling and still convinced that innocence was the same as facts. She'd been so sure that no one would believe her, so convinced of her own culpability, that she'd simply accepted the narrative that she'd pushed Stephanie. It was easier than fighting it. Fighting it required believing she deserved better. "Because I thought I did it," Corinne said finally. "Because she died because I was there and I didn't help her. Because I was a coward who didn't call an ambulance or try to save her. The details didn't seem to matter." "Well, they matter now," Hernandez said. "Lily Chen released this footage specifically because she wanted the record to be accurate. She said, and I quote from her statement, 'My mother's death was a tragedy. Corinne Mitchell's actions after my mother's death were criminal. But the truth matters. My mother wouldn't want a lie to serve as her legacy, even a lie that further punishes the woman who left her to die.'" Corinne felt something shift in her chest. Not absolution. She'd learned by now that absolution wasn't real, wasn't possible. But something like acknowledgement. Lily Chen, who had every right to want Corinne to suffer for eternity, had chosen instead to want the truth told. The appellate process took 11 months. Corinne was released on bail pending trial while the new evidence was evaluated. When she walked out of the prison, it was a Tuesday afternoon in December. She walked out into a world where she was no longer famous. The Corinne Mitchell brand had been thoroughly murdered by the internet and had stayed dead. No one recognized her. No one knew her story except as a piece of trivia they might have forgotten. Derek had kept the house. Michelle Torres helped Corinne find a small apartment in Long Beach, far from the hills, far from the expensive neighborhoods where she'd once belonged. The new trial was straightforward. The DA presented the security footage. The jury watched it 3 times. They deliberated for 2 hours and came back with a not guilty verdict on the charge of pushing, guilty on the charge of failing to render aid to an injured person and fleeing the scene of an accident. Corinne works at a community center in Long Beach, teaching yoga and leading wellness groups. She doesn't have an Instagram account. She doesn't post pictures of herself. She doesn't try to make money off her image or her story. Once a week, she meets with a therapist. Once a month, she volunteers at a women's shelter. She donates most of her wages to organizations that support dementia research and family caregivers. None of this makes the past right. None of this brings Stephanie back. But it's something. On a Tuesday morning, 5 years after her release, Karen is leading a yoga class when she sees someone watching from the doorway. It's a woman in her late 20s with dark hair and an expression of careful neutrality. Karen recognizes her immediately, though they've never met face to face. Lily Chen. The class ends, and Karen expects Lily to leave. Instead, Lily waits until everyone else has gone, and then she steps into the empty studio. "I wanted to see you," Lily says. "I wanted to see the version of you that exists in this world, the one where you're not famous and rich and performing for the internet." "Hello," Karen says quietly. "Thank you for releasing the footage, for telling the truth." "I didn't do it for you," Lily says quickly. "I did it for my mother. She was a good person, and I wanted her story to be told accurately. But I also did it because I realized something." Lily pauses, struggling with the words. "I realized that punishing you forever wasn't going to bring my mother back, and I realized that what you did after my mother died, leaving her there, was a kind of punishment that might matter more than anything a court could do. You have to live with that. Forever." "I know," Karen says. "I think about it every day." "Do you?" Lily's expression is sharp now, uncertain. "Or do you just think that you do because that's the narrative that makes you feel better?" It's a fair question. Karen has to consider it seriously. "Both," she says finally. "I think about it genuinely, and I also use the thinking about it as a way to feel like I'm doing enough penance. But I try to catch myself doing that. I try to be honest about when I'm performing even for myself." Lily sits down on the floor of the studio, not in a yoga pose, just sitting. Karen sits too. "My mother loved this pool," Lily says. "The neon green one, the public recreation center. She took Marcus and me there every summer. That was the place where she was happiest, I think. And when I was trying to decide whether to release the footage, I kept thinking about that pool. About how the water was so bright and so artificial and so joyful, and how it had nothing to do with who she was in her daily life, where she was scared and confused. The truth of my mother's life was both things at once, the darkness and the brightness, the fear and the joy." Karen waits. "I realized that your truth is also both things at once," Lily continues. "You did something terrible, and you left my mother to die, but you also didn't mean to push her, and you're trying now at least. I can't absolve you, I don't think I should. But I also don't think my mother would want me to hate you forever. She was never a person who stayed angry for long." Karen's eyes fill with tears. "I'm so sorry for everything. I know that's not enough, but—" "It's not enough," Lily agrees. "But it's something. And I came here today to tell you that I've stopped thinking about revenge. I've stopped checking your social media accounts, even though you don't have any. I've stopped following the stories of what you're doing now. I came here today to let go of the person you were so I could stop carrying her around inside me." "I'm going back to school," Lily says. "I'm going to become a lawyer. I'm going to help families who don't have power, whose loved ones have died in ways the justice system doesn't care about. I'm going to honor my mother that way, and I think that's better than hating you forever." Lily stands up and walks to the door. At the threshold, she turns back. "There's one more thing," she says. "I started a foundation in my mother's name for families dealing with dementia and cognitive decline. If you want to donate money, if you ever have extra money, send it to the Stephanie Chen Foundation. That would be appropriate." "I will," Karen says. "I promise I will." "I know you will," Lily says, and there's something like forgiveness in her voice, though not the kind that absolves. The kind that says, "I see you and I'm letting you go." After Lily leaves, Karen sits in the empty yoga studio and cries for the first time in 5 years. Not for herself, for Stephanie, for Lily, for the family that had been broken by her choices and that would never be fully repaired. She thinks about the pool, the neon green pool, so bright and so artificial and so full of joy. She thinks about how that's what social media was, how that's what her Instagram account had been, how the brightness was real in a way, but it was also hiding all of the darkness underneath. And she thinks about how the darkness is also real, how both things are true at once, how you can be both the woman by the pool and the woman who left a dying woman on the stairs, how redemption isn't about becoming a different person. It's about becoming the same person, but honest about it. Karen packs up her yoga mats and walks out into the California sunlight. Behind her, the studio is empty. The water in the world keeps moving forward. And Karen, for the first time since all of this began, tries to move forward too. "I wanted to reach out because something has happened that I think you should know about. Over the past few years, I've done a lot of research into cases similar to my mother's, cases where wealthy individuals harmed people and walked free. I've been working with Lily's foundation, helping to document cases where the justice system failed. In that work, I discovered something that changed how I think about what happened to my mother. I discovered that the person who originally framed my mother's death as a suicide attempt, not suicide itself, but an attempt that had been misreported, was Detective Robert Walsh. He's since retired, but he was the detective who investigated my mother's death initially. I discovered that Detective Walsh had a pattern. Throughout his career, he handled cases involving wealthy defendants, and in nearly every instance, he found ways to make the cases go away. When he retired, he took a consulting job with a law firm that specializes in defending high-net-worth individuals in criminal cases. My mother's death wasn't initially ruled a fall, Karen. It was initially ruled a possible suicide attempt by someone with dementia. It was only changed to accidental after the family made noise about it. And that change happened not because of the evidence, but because of a consultant working for the family's lawyers, Robert Walsh. I'm telling you this because the foundation is planning to go public with everything we've found. We're going to present this to the DA's office, and we wanted you to know that none of this is your fault. You were a victim of a corrupt system. You were also a perpetrator of a crime. Both of those things are true. My mother wouldn't want your suffering to continue, but she would want the truth. We're coming for the system that protected people like you. We're going to burn it down. And when we do, I want you to understand that it won't be because we hate you. It will be because we love the memory of the woman my mother was, and we think she deserves better than a system that made it so easy for her death to be forgotten. Marcus. Karen reads the letter 5 times. She thinks about the security footage that Lily released, the footage that had saved her from a 30-year sentence. She thinks about how that footage might never have been found, might never have been released, if Marcus hadn't been determined to investigate. She thinks about Detective Walsh, and about how many other Stephanie Chens there might be out there, whose deaths had been covered up by a system that prioritized wealth and power over truth. And then she does something she didn't think she would do. She calls the DA's office and asks to speak to James Hernandez. I want to help, she tells him. With the Marcus Chen case, with exposing what happened, I want to testify about everything. I want to help burn down whatever system protected me. Hernandez is silent for a moment. Are you sure? He asks finally. This will put you back in the public eye. This will destroy any chance you have of anonymity or peace. I know, Karen says, I'm sure. And that's where the story ends, really. Not with Karen finding redemption. Redemption isn't real, isn't possible for someone who's done what she's done. But with Karen making a choice to stop running from the truth. To stop hiding, even in her humility. To stand in the light with all of her darkness visible and say, I am what I am, and I will spend the rest of my life being honest about what that is. In the end, it's Lily's mother, the dead woman, the forgotten woman, the woman whose bright smile in front of a neon green pool was the last pure moment she experienced before the dementia started stealing her away. It's Stephanie Chen who wins. Not because Karen is punished, not because justice is served in any traditional sense, but because the truth, finally and at last, is told. And that's worth something. On a Tuesday morning, 5 years after Lily had walked into Karen's yoga studio, Karen stands on the steps of the courthouse and tells reporters about the corruption in the detective division, about Detective Walsh, about the systematic way that wealthy defendants had been protected by a system that was supposed to protect everyone equally. She tells them about Stephanie Chen, not as a victim of her own crime, but as a woman who was victimized by the entire system, who was failed by the system, whose death was hidden by the system. And when she's done, she walks back into the courthouse to continue her testimony. The camera flashes follow her. The internet stirs, trying to process the Karen Mitchell from the past, the Karen Mitchell who is now. And behind all of this, in the background where no one is looking, Lily Chen and Marcus Chen sit in the gallery and watch the machinery of justice start to turn.